this could be the start. This could be the shake, the worry that Putin has. It makes him think maybe I can't get what I want. Maybe there's a better way to go about this.
And William B. Taylor joins me now. Good morning.
Good morning, Kate. How are you?
I'm well, thank you. I know that you've described last night's agreement on Ukraine as a breakthrough. For people who haven't followed what actually has been agreed, why is it so significant?
I think it's significant because for the first time, in person, on paper, open statements in public, leaders of European nations have said that they are going to send troops to Ukraine after a ceasefire to ensure that Ukraine is not invaded again by the Russians. That's a big deal. And the Americans chimed in and said that they were going to support as well. They were going to support with intelligence and drones and sensors, as well as military support to the Europeans when they go into Ukraine. So I think for those two reasons, the Europeans as well as the Americans, I think this is a big deal.
That offer of US military support in the event of a Russian attack does seem to be a significant change to the position that Donald Trump had previously taken. What do you think is going on there? Is that something that America was always willing to do but not willing to say out loud? Or is that a change of heart?
It's been some time in coming. I do recall that when the Europeans traveled to Washington with President Zelensky, this was back in September, after this disastrous meeting that President Trump had with President Putin in Alaska. And on about 3 days' notice, Europeans showed up with Zelensky in the White House. And during that meeting, where this topic was on the agenda, during that meeting, President Trump said that he was going to provide support, air support, to this coalition of the willing. So even back several months ago, this was at least being discussed. And I'm sure Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner, representing the president, were not doing it on their own. They certainly had the okay from the White House. So I think this is a real commitment.
And do you think if you were Ukrainian, if you were President Zelensky, do you think those US guarantees can be relied on? Because in the context of Venezuela, in the context of what Donald Trump and his team are now saying about Greenland, some people might question whether or not Europe and European allies should have faith in America anymore.
Right. What Donald Trump is saying is he's being aggressive. And you could take that as saying, well, the Ukrainians will need that aggression if the Russians attack. However, I take your point, Kate. I take your point that it's a bit erratic coming out of Washington. Donald Trump has been a little erratic about his views on NATO. However, the latest NATO summit, the most recent NATO summit, was very positive, very constructive. It was one where the Europeans stepped up and committed 5% of their GDP to defense. That made Donald Trump very happy. And that happiness resulted in some strong statements of support for NATO. Strong statements of support even for this Article 5 that is being discussed for Ukraine. So, yes, up and down, but I think it's good enough for the Ukrainians, and I think it's really a strong message for Putin not to test this commitment.
And that's the big question here, isn't it? What happens next with Russia? Because President Putin has made very, very clear that any troops from France, from the UK, any NATO troops anywhere near Russian borders would be an escalation in his mind, would actually escalate this conflict, not neutralize it. Do you think that this will bring him to the table? Is it likely to secure a guarantee with Russia?
You know, the Russians don't get a say in the security guarantee that the Europeans and Americans provide to the Ukrainians. They just don't get a say. If the Europeans want to make that commitment, if the Americans want to back up that commitment to Ukraine, that's up to those parties, not up to Russia. Now, it is certainly true that if it's part of an agreement that's going to be presented to the Russians, that the Russians may not agree. They may not agree. And then it comes to your question is how to get Putin to the table. Maybe this will do it. Maybe this will be a signal of strong intent, of commitment by the Europeans, commitment by the Americans to stand by the Ukrainians, and to make Putin realize he can't win. He can't win. He's going to have to come to the table and agree to the ceasefire. Maybe that will. However, more likely, in my view, is pressure on Putin coming from President Trump and others on the military side and on the economic side. Um, more effective sanctions, more enforcement of sanctions. The sanctions, it turns out, that are focused on squeezing off, on choking off the flow of revenue funds from Russia's sale of oil and gas to the international market, exports of oil and gas, that's having an effect. It's those revenues are down a lot, 30, 40%. They are down. That's having an effect on the ability of the Russians to be able to pursue this war. So yes, more effective sanctions, but also the weapons, the long-range weapons. The Ukrainians are showing that they've got their own long-range weapons, and they're doing great damage to the Russian oil infrastructure, which again is having an effect on the flow of revenue into the Russian economy. But we Americans could do something more. We could provide other long-range weapons that would help the Ukrainians do that.
So are you hopeful then that this is the start of the end?
I am hopeful. A lot can go wrong. I've been hopeful before, but this could be the start. This could be the shake, the worry that Putin has. It makes him think maybe I can't get what I want. Maybe there's a better way to go about this.
You mentioned oil there. There is talk now of America chasing the Venezuelan shadow fleet of tankers around the world. Now, it's something we've seen America do before, intercept these tankers, but there is now a tanker off the Irish coast, pretty close to where we are now. And it's said to be on the way to Russia. Do you think this action by America, the potential to try and take that tanker on, is a good thing? I mean, it's obviously linked to Venezuela, but it's oil that is taken from Venezuela on the way to Russia. So I suppose it's linking both stories here, isn't it?
It is linking both stories. And it goes back to what you and I just talked about in terms of choking off the Russian economy, the flow of funds into the Russian economy, that it's funding their war. And the Americans can do it. We've shown that we can do it. However, Europeans can too. There are other Europeans that are going to be able to, they've already demonstrated that they can board ships. And so the Europeans can step up and do the same kind of thing.
And just finally, I mean, obviously, we've been talking a lot about Venezuela in the last couple of days, and we've talked about it in this context too. But some of the remarks from the US administration overnight about Greenland have really struck a chord here, including the idea that Donald Trump will in some way take Greenland before the end of this term, and that the use of force is being considered. Is that something you would support?
No, not at all. We need allies. The Americans, we, United States, we need allies. We need the Danes, we need the Brits, we need the Canadians, we need European allies. We need South Korea, we need Japan, we need allies. This is not the way to cement a strong alliance, and we need that strong alliance.
So you would tell the Trump administration to back off?
Absolutely. I would tell the Trump administration they can have everything they want without doing this crazy stuff or even talking about crazy stuff of using military means to take over Greenland. They don't need that. The security of Greenland, we can be a participant. We can be a bigger participant in that security. That's fine. We don't need to destroy the alliance.
William B. Taylor, as ever, so great to have you on the programme. Thank you very much.
Thanks for having me, Kate.